Hello, and welcome to Climbing on the Bookshelf. This episode is with the Writer and Mountaineer that was a member of Nimsdai's team that summited Manaslu. She has also summited Aconcagua. It's from Manaslu's summit, or just below, where she took the inspiration for her new book, Breathless, which is out today. She is, of course, Amy McCulloch. She started out as a writer of children's and young adult fiction and has also co-authored the #1 best-selling novel, The Magpie Society. Her new book, Breathless, is a thriller set on a high-altitude mountain, so strap yourself in for an adventure like no other. Amy McCulloch's book is already tipped to be one of the crime thrillers of the year. If you want to see where she got her inspiration from, there's a short YouTube behind-the-scenes video which I've linked to in the show notes. You can find her on Instagram, Amy McCulloch Books, or on Twitter, Amy McCulloch. Check out her Linktree, which details her chosen charity Tommy's when she enters the Marathon Des Sables. Any donations would be awesome. And don't forget to see if you can pick up that Waterstones special edition of Breathless with the very cool sprayed edge. If you like what you hear, then also don't forget to subscribe, 5-star and review my podcast on Spotify, iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. Here it is. How are you?
Yes, I'm very well, thank you.
Look at that. 7 o'clock on the dot. That's fantastic.
No problem.
How are you? All right?
Yeah, fine, thank you. Getting quite excited now. It's like a week till my book comes out. So.
I bet you are, yeah. I've been very excited, yeah. Good times. How was your wedding and honeymoon?
Oh, it was great, thank you. At so many points it could have gone terribly wrong.
Oh, no.
Well, just, with
no.
PCR tests and worrying about testing positive or someone catching COVID or anything. And but we were so lucky that went off without a hitch.
Yeah, from what I saw from the pictures and things, it looked like you're having a great time.
Yes, yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, and the weather was okay for you and stuff as well.
It was, yeah. Getting
Fantastic.
married in Scotland in January, especially when you want to do it outside, is always
yeah, sure. If we could talk a little bit about you growing up and maybe sort of getting in how you got into reading or writing through school or whatever, or your hobbies or whatever, that'd be a good place to start, I think.
Sure.
So if you could just let us know just how you got into being a writer.
Yeah, so I probably started writing when I was in high school, just making up stories and trying to regale my friends with various sort of stories that I would make up. But I didn't really start to pursue it seriously until I got to university. And that's when I was really big fantasy and science fiction reader at the time. And I particularly, loved the classics of sci-fi and fantasy. Like I loved Dune and Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings. But what I was realizing, my family background is my mother is Chinese and my father is from England. So I wasn't really seeing much fantasy fiction that was kind of reflective of my Chinese heritage. A lot of it is sort of very sort of Western, medieval, European based. And so I decided that I would try and write something myself. And that ultimately became my first novel to get published for children, which was called The Oathbreaker's Shadow, which came out 10 years ago. So yes, I've always been writing kind of on the side, but didn't really make it my career until sort of my mid-20s.
Okay, sure. And I also saw that you did a collaboration with Zoe Sugg.
Yes.
With the Magpie Society. Could you talk a little bit about that? I don't really know about that, to be honest.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, so the majority of my career I've been writing, as I said, for children and young adults. And on the other side, I had a day job for a long time as an editor in a publishing house. So I worked for Penguin Children's Book as an editor, and was lucky enough to publish Zoe's first books, the Girl Online series, which were very, very popular and successful young adult series. When I left publishing, she and I stayed in contact, and when we'd always talked about writing a series together, something a bit more murder mystery, kind of thriller style, and that eventually became the Magpie Society. We collaborated on that together, so it was a good fun project, but that was sort of the last young adult books that I've done. When I was an editor at Penguin, we were always looking for kind of new ways to reach a teenage audience. And obviously YouTube at the time, this was 2013 or 2012, YouTube celebrities were really, they were huge, and they were changing the way that teenagers found books and movies and consumed culture and things like that. And Zoe had always said on her channel herself that she was into reading and writing and had been for a long time since childhood. So we
Okay.
kind of, as the power of Penguin kind of got in touch
Yeah.
with her management and said, "Oh, would she ever have any interest in writing a book?" And she absolutely did. So it was sort of a
Yeah.
project that came about quite organically that way.
Okay. Okay. And you didn't meet for quite a while, did you?
Well, we didn't get to meet during the Magpie Society writing much because of COVID.
Yeah,
So
that's
suddenly
right.
we were collaborating on this book, and we were meant to be writing together every week, and then we had to do it
Yeah.
all over Zoom and voice notes
Sure.
and everything like that from each other's homes, respective
Yeah.
homes.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It
A
must
lot.
have been quite difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, it was difficult because, writing in itself is always such a solitary pursuit normally. So I was quite looking forward to having a co-writer, a co-author, to kind of bounce ideas off and everything in
Right.
person. And we weren't really able to do that. But actually, it worked out. In the end, it worked out fine because we were both able to chat on the phone or chat over FaceTime and things. So
Sure.
it was fine.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's not quite the same.
No, but it all worked out quite well. So yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Good. Going back to your childhood, sort of being at school and things, were there any sort of sports that you were kind of keen on, and kind of if there was any sort of hint of kind of climbing or mountaineering at all?
Well, so I was born in the UK, but my parents moved us to Canada when I was about 10.
Right.
And I was never a very athletic child at all in England. But when we moved to Canada, we moved in January. And of course, where we moved to Ottawa, it was minus 30 degrees.
Okay.
There were full snowbanks along the sides of the roads. It was a completely different environment.
Yeah.
And of course, all my schoolmates knew how to ski, how to skate as naturally
Sure.
as, running or walking.
Yeah.
So it was very important to my parents to kind of make sure that my sister and I had that opportunity to learn how to ski and to skate.
Yeah.
So we were sort of thrown into those lessons. We were 10 years old, but everyone else in the class, beginner class, was sort of 3 or 4.
Okay.
But actually, that was I'm very grateful that they did that for us because it was necessary and it was something we loved to do in the end was sort of skiing and ice skating. But I never pursued it to any level beyond recreational, just to be able to enjoy the mountains. So I have to say I probably wasn't very athletic or that sporty for a long, long time.
Okay.
Not until after university.
Sure. What did you do at university?
I studied English literature,
Okay.
unsurprisingly.
Okay.
Medieval and Old English literature, actually, in
Okay.
Toronto.
Which kind of ties into your sort of interest in the reading it.
Yes.
You've recently signed up to do the Marathon des Sables.
Yes.
Yes, that's a very demanding and brave, maybe foolish idea. I don't know. Could you? How did you? What made you think of doing that?
Well, it's all really stemmed from this mountaineering journey that I've been on over the past few years, really.
Yeah.
But to get to the Marathon des Sables particularly, over the pandemic, I haven't really been able to do as much climbing and sort of outdoors pursuits as I was,
Yeah.
hoping to do over that time. And the one of the things I could do was just walk around my neighborhood and run around my neighborhood
Okay.
for a lot of it. And so when I was trying to think about what kind of challenge I wanted to kind of tackle for myself, the Marathon des Sables had always been in the back of my mind because I love desert environments. So I said
Okay.
talked about my first book, The Oathbreaker's Shadow. That's set in a kind of desert-inspired world, and I just thought what mountaineering has given me confidence-wise is that I believe I have the kind of mental resilience to endure a kind of 20-hour plus walking
Yeah.
in very
Sure.
tough environments, tough conditions. I know that I can have that kind of resilience um, and mental strength to keep going. So I thought if I could, the Marathon des Sables is obviously known as one of the toughest races in the world, but it's
Yeah.
also considered quite achievable for runners as long as you can keep going,
Yeah.
through the long stage, the 80-kilometer stage. And so yeah, I just thought it felt like the right kind of thing to do, complementary to the mountaineering, I
Sure.
suppose, because it was sort
Yeah.
of similar
It's kind of endurance, isn't it? Yeah. And when is that? It's at the end of March, isn't it?
At the end of March, so it's only less than 50 days away, I think.
Sure. So how are your preparation and training? How's that going?
Yeah, it's going pretty well. I had a little bit of a break while I got married and went on honeymoon.
Okay.
I considered that, what do they call it? Sort of a deload training week.
Okay.
Because I'd been hitting sort of 70, 80 kilometers a week before that. So
Okay,
I'm
good.
now reamping back up, and I'm starting to do my heat acclimatization. So before that, I've been used to acclimatizing to low altitude, and now I'm trying to acclimatize to sort of the searing hot temperatures I might face out
Sure.
there. So
Sure.
that involves a lot of hot yoga and sitting in saunas and things.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, great. Which kind of leads on to the kind of mountaineering experience that you have. Is that I see that you've summited a couple of 8,000 meter peaks. One which is Aconcagua, which isn't an 10,000 meter, but it's the tallest in South America. And you've also done Manaslu as well.
Yes,
And you were the youngest Canadian woman to summit. Is that right?
I was. Yeah.
Which is a fantastic achievement. I think it's amazing.
Well, thank you. What I found amazing was that there were only actually 6 Canadian women in history who've ever done it.
Okay, crikey, yeah. Okay. So is your training kind of transfer from that to the marathon as well?
Well, it does, because I trained for Manaslu. I went out to Snowdonia and did
Okay.
as much kind of mountain skills training out there as I could, but for the majority of it, I was living in London. So I would be doing a lot of long distance running, but also going out to the only hills I could find nearby London, which was Box Hill in Surrey, and just
Okay, yeah, I
up
know
and
that.
down, yeah, walking up and down the steps,
Yeah.
which some people think, oh, how can you train for an 8,000er just by walking up and down Box Hill? I think you have to do it a lot of times.
Yes, yes.
But in that sense, the Marathon des Sables also, you kind of there isn't a lot of, obviously there's no altitude involved, but there is quite a lot of climbing. You do go up and down these sort of jebbles. So I'm
Yeah.
also training my endurance and climbing ability, I suppose, again by going out to Box Hill.
Yes. Okay. So with the team that you went with, Manaslu, how did you get on with those? And were you the only woman?
I wasn't the only woman. In fact, it was quite unusual. My team on the mountain. I was actually on Nims Dai's Project Possible team.
Okay.
So obviously Nims is the
Great.
star of 14 Peaks,
Yeah. Yeah.
documentary, and I was on his team as he was attempting to summit Manaslu, which was his 13 of the
Okay.
14 peaks that he did.
Yeah.
And so there were 3 women on the team, including myself.
Okay.
One who was an extremely accomplished climber who was climbing without oxygen.
Good grief. Okay.
I know she was
Yeah.
she was amazing, my inspiration. And then another who was who I'd actually climbed Aconcagua with, who was
Okay.
on a sort of similar level to me. But all 3 of us kind of shared a tent at the higher camps, so we got very close together. Yeah, so the team itself, obviously I had known Nims from before. Sorry if you can hear some police sirens in the background.
No, it's fine. That's okay.
Trouble with South London. But yeah, so I'd known Nims. He'd led the team on Aconcagua that I was on as
Okay.
well.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I'd met a lot of the Sherpa team who were on our group as well beforehand, which actually was something that had been very important to me, and one of the reasons why I'd chosen to climb with Nims's company in Aconcagua.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a funny thing, one of these big commercial high altitude expeditions, because quite often you don't know the rest of the team that you're climbing with, and yet you're sort of forced to kind of put your trust and
You're kind of stuck with them, not stuck with them, but
you
kind of.
you are for
Yeah.
weeks in some of the most very difficult conditions, challenging conditions, because let alone the climbing itself, which of course is challenging, but the actual living at base camp for weeks on end with no
Yes.
running water, living on a glacier in a tent, very little privacy. All of those things are quite mentally taxing as well.
Yeah.
And if you clash with any of the, quite frankly, very big personalities, a lot of these people who come on these expeditions, if there are any personality clashes, then it can be very difficult.
Yeah, sure. So did you have to do sort of rotational climbing to acclimatize at different altitudes and things?
Yes, yeah, we did. So
how long did that take?
we went up to Camp 1 and then Camp 2, sleeping at each stage. And then we were meant to go up to Camp 3 as well, but the weather closed in So we did that, and then we went up to Camp 1 one more time. So it wasn't actually as big of an acclimatization rotation as you do on Everest.
Okay.
But yes, we had to sort of, and of course we're living at base camp, which is about 5,500 meters.
So how did you find that? Were you kind of mentally tough enough for it, and sort of geared up for it?
Well, I have to say, the funny thing about acclimatizing is that the first time I went up to Camp 1, I found it extremely difficult. And I remember reaching lower Camp 1 and being told that we were camped a bit, even further along. So I probably still had another 45 minutes of sort of walking, climbing to go, and I just burst into tears.
Oh,
because
crikey.
I couldn't imagine pushing my body any further than I pushed it. And yet the second time we went up to Camp 1, it was incredible, to see the effects that acclimatization had, because the second time up, I found it, it passed so much quicker, almost half the time that I did it the first time. The second time was much, much easier. So it was an interesting kind of experience, and just sort of went to show that wasn't necessarily my fitness levels at the time, or it was just the effect that being in that kind of high altitude can have on your body. It's just, you don't even realize it at the time how much weaker you are.
Yeah, sure.
Initially. But then again, when we got to Camp 3, Camp 4, where we hadn't been before, and we were going for our summit push and starting to use oxygen, once again, all of these new experiences, I'd never used oxygen at altitude before. And even the process of just wearing the mask, I was in my full down suit, but it was extremely hot because the sun was shining and reflecting off the snow all around us. And all of those things that you might have read about, but hadn't necessarily, ever experienced before. So you try to be as mentally prepared as you could possibly be, but actually experiencing it is something different. And I remember thinking at Camp 3, on my way up to Camp 4, there's no way.
So what have I done?
Yeah, what have I done? Just leave me here.
So when you start wearing the face mask, is it because you'd not done it before?
Yeah.
Did you find it quite restrictive? Even though it was helping you? Yeah,
very restrictive. And it's also at Camp 3, you don't necessarily need it yet, but you're moving higher and higher. So as you get higher, you are going to need it. So rather than faff around later on, you kind of start off wearing it, and it's on a very low flow at that point. So it feels barely imperceptible. It feels basically imperceptible that you're wearing any oxygen, but the feeling of the kind of the claustrophobia of having the mask over your face and mouth, and you're sweating as well. So the sort of sweat is pooling, and then when you get higher up, all of a sudden it's frost all around your mouth. It's very initially it's very uncomfortable.
So is it quite restrictive with kind of being able to see as well? Because I guess you'd lose your peripheral vision as well.
A little bit. I mean, it's mostly well, especially if you are wearing then your goggles or sunglasses. It picks up and everything. It does. It is kind of challenging. And I remember some of the team were saying, "Oh, I don't want to wear it yet," and yet our guides were very clear. If you're not used to climbing without oxygen, you have to wear it, because otherwise you become a danger to others on the mountain.
Yeah, sure. So if you could you just talk me through your kind of final summit push?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I actually left about midnight. So I'm one of the slower members of the team normally. So I left an hour before everyone. Actually, it was quite amazing, because obviously it's the dead of night and just following a head torch. And I was climbing with my Sherpa, Tenzing Kasang Sherpa, who was, had already become a great friend on the mountain. So it was really great to have him alongside. But all I remember thinking, and I wonder if this is the hypoxia or what was going on, but I was really quite panicked about catching up with people in front of me, or then being passed by someone, because you're on you're on the fixed lines and you follow the route to the summit. But if you pass someone, all of a sudden I was thinking, oh gosh, if I suddenly slow down now, they're going to be annoyed with me. It was like being, when you overtake a car on the motorway or something, you think, oh God, if now I slow down and they have to overtake,
they're going to overtake,
they'll be really annoyed and everything. Even though I'm certain that absolutely no one had any thought in their head about me and my experience. That was all I could think
Yeah.
about, was my position in respects to everyone else on the mountain. But actually, as it happened, we all sort of spread out because we we're all going at our own natural pace.
Yeah, sure.
And at one point, so I left it at midnight, and I was going fairly well up on the summit. It was actually probably my most enjoyable part of the climb. I'd found the previous day extremely hard, but I'd woken up just full of excitement and energy, knowing that this was the moment. And at one point, Kasang sat me down and said, to take a sip of water and things. And he's like, "Amy, we're going too quick. If we go at this pace, we'll miss the sunrise and we'll summit in the dark." And I thought, "Oh no, I don't want to reach the summit in the dark."
Yeah.
But actually, we were there right as the sun broke, and it
Oh,
was,
fantastic.
yeah, it was. I mean, it was just the most magical and surreal experience I could ever imagine. Just watching the clouds, you see all the peaks below. Manaslu is quite far away from any other of the.
It's quite remote, isn't it? I believe. Yeah.
Quite remote. It's sort of off on its own. So all of the other peaks around it are lower. So you really
Yeah.
have that sense of just being on the top of the world.
Yeah.
And we were so lucky to have great weather. Amazing summit window.
The weather can really put a stop to it, can't it?
Well, yeah, absolutely, it really can. And also I was lucky that I didn't have to wait for anyone on the summit or anything, or wait in line. I was able to
Okay.
summit up, just walk up to the summit, and yeah, it was unbelievable.
So was it just your team that was up there at that point, or were there other teams as
There
well?
were a couple of other teams, but not many. And as I said, everyone had sort of spread out over the day. And because I'd left early, actually no one had caught up with me quite yet. So
Okay.
I was able to do that. And then I waited just a little bit beneath the summit on a little plateau, and then
Okay.
head up with some of my other team members as they were going by. I also sat down just beneath the summit and
Okay.
took out my notebook and started writing.
Started writing there on the actual summit. Fantastic.
just below, just still in the depths.
As you do, but
As you do, yeah. That's what it's like being a writer in these kind of places. You feel like you got to try and capture it, even though it didn't make a lot of sense when I read it.
Sure, yeah, sure. So what was the descent like? Because obviously, as everyone always says, a bit of a cliche. Once you're at the top, you're only halfway.
Mm-hmm. Well,
you've got to come all the way down. Yeah,
you do, and we went all the way down. And I think, what was quite interesting to me, because although you have, I had Kasang with me all the way up to the summit. Actually, on the way down, I was told to make my way to base camp, and for a lot of it, I was on my own, because the Sherpas were sort of actually called off to help someone who was experiencing some difficulty.
Okay.
So I found myself on my own quite a lot, and you've already done what you think is already the hard work, and so you're exhausted heading into hour 15, 16 on the mountain.
Yeah.
And it did really make clear to me just how thin the line between life and death that you're walking.
Life and death at that height.
Yeah. At that height, at that altitude. I mean, Manaslu on a fixed line being considered a relatively non-technical peak for the most part, apart from one ice fall. As long as you kind of remain attached to the line, you're okay. But one mental slip, one safety not attached. I had my most kind of terrifying, I suppose, experience was I did take just a little stumble with my crampons and had a fall. And if I hadn't been attached to my safety line, I would have gone, that would have been it.
A long way down, yeah.
And so you couldn't be that, that's the thing I both love and is quite terrifying about mountaineering. But, you have to be vigilant about your safety and your personal admin, and one mental lapse or one feeling of, oh, it'll be fine if I just because it can be repetitive and frustrating sometimes to always be clipping in, clipping out, on the line, and it can be boring. And I knew a lot of people who ahead of me who would be like, oh, it doesn't matter so much maybe if I'm not attached, but
Try to be if you can. Yeah. So what would be the kind of procedure if you kind of came upon someone and had to go round them? Have you got two lines you're clipped in, and you go round them with one and attach the other, and that's it, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like that. Yeah.
So you're always clipped in at some point, no matter
Always
what's.
at some point.
Yeah, sure, and that would stop you tumbling a long way. Yeah. So that sounds absolutely amazing. So how long did it take you to get down to base camp and then get home to actual home?
Well, so I summited at, I think, about 6:30 in the morning.
Okay.
And then I was back in base camp by 3:30, 4 p.m., I think. I'm trying to calculate how many hours that is.
So it's quite yeah.
It was quite a long day.
Yes.
Once everyone was down, it took someone on our team stopped at Camp 1 and slept over at Camp 1. So once everyone was back in base camp, we were basically packed up and out of there very, very quickly. Okay. It was we were on Nims's team, so there was a party.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Kind of renowned for that afterwards, and I'm always amazed at these base camps that they can kind of bake a cake, and
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? The support team are just there's kind of unsung heroes almost, aren't they?
Oh, totally, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible what they do. When you summited and started making a few notes and writing down, was that your new book that you've got coming out? If you could tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, it was. I mean, actually, the idea had come to me more or less at base camp, and it was, again, what we've talked about, that awareness of how thin the line was between life and death, between safety and danger. How if one thing had gone wrong, if there'd been a change in the weather, an avalanche or a crevasse, a snow bridge over a crevasse collapsing or something, how lethal the mountain could be. But also the isolation from anywhere else, the lack of authorities on the mountain, and then as we've talked about as well, the kind of differing and diverse personalities that you get on the mountain, and how you don't know, there's no vetting process as to who goes. If someone with nefarious intentions was there, how vulnerable potentially you are. And these were sort of the things that I was thinking about while I was at base camp, kind of realizing what a perfect location and setting it was for a kind of a thriller.
Thinking of thriller genre that's kind of based on a mountain, I don't think there are that many.
No, there aren't. Funnily enough, there are in a books and novel sense, fiction. There is couple of great ghost stories. So I don't know if you've Thin Air by Michelle Paver. That's
no, I haven't.
Great ghost story set on a historical climb of Kanchenjunga.
Okay.
That was really interesting. And then I suppose I always think to those, do I call them classic? I don't know, but those movies of the early 2000s, like Vertical Limit or something like that.
Yes.
Those kind of thriller movies, action movies, very, totally no basis on any real K2 that anyone would recognize.
Yes.
But, that kind of thriller. But yes, in terms of fiction, not really. But I think there's a bit of room for some fiction too.
Yeah, sure. Could you tell me a little bit about the book and when it comes out and what it's called?
Yeah, sure. So the book is called Breathless. It comes out on the 17th of February in the UK. Be available in all good retailers and your favorite bookshop. But basically, it's an exhilarating thriller set on an extreme high-altitude mountaineering expedition. It follows the story of struggling journalist Cecily Wong, who lands kind of the interview of a lifetime, legendary mountaineer Charles McVeigh, who is trying to complete a world record attempt of summiting all the 14 highest mountains in the world, alpine style, so without any oxygen and without the support of any fixed lines or anything like that. And so if she can get this interview, she knows that it will hopefully make her career. But before he'll grant her the interview, he wants her to climb the mountain alongside him so that she can kind of get real firsthand experience. But as they start to climb on the mountain, there are kind of a series of deadly incidents that are written off as just accidents of the mountain. But Cecily isn't so sure. She starts to wonder, is this just part of the risk that comes with such an extreme sport, or is the death zone the perfect place for a serial killer to hide?
Sounds fantastic. Can't wait for it to come out.
Thank you.
So how technical is the book in sort of climbing terms? Because obviously there are many people that are going to buy it that aren't into climbing or mountaineering, but I'm sure there might be a few terms in there that you've used and you've kind of, I don't know, maybe dumbed down a little bit just so that the wider audience can understand it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had a couple of editors, one in the UK, one in the US, and neither of them had any climbing experience whatsoever. So they definitely were there to help point out anything that was too sort of obscure or obtuse to kind of the average reader. But funnily enough, the things that they made me take out weren't necessarily the very technical parts, but sometimes the bits of mountaineering that that don't make for a great thriller, which is things like, there's a lot of waiting around at base camp. There's a lot of introspection, a lot of even the long walks between camps. It's a lot of one step after the other, and I don't want to say boredom, because that's not the right term, but there's a lot of waiting. There's a lot of
waiting with nothing to do,
and just seeing whether the mountain is going to allow you to climb that day or not.
Sure.
So some of the parts of the book have had to sort of be, I suppose, sped up for the interests of maintaining the reader's attention.
Okay.
But in terms of the technical side, I really tried to make that as accessible as possible, while also maintaining that authentic atmosphere and trying to get across as much of my personal experience of the mountain. Now, I've been lucky enough to do some incredible climbs, but my mountaineering journey only began a few years ago. So I myself, I'm not someone who's kind of grown up in the sport or who have been here, been in the mountaineering world for a long time. So I'm hoping that some of that kind of the newness of it to me as well, hopefully I've been able to explain it across to any readers who aren't familiar with mountaineering.
Fantastic. That sounds great.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, sounds really good. So have you got any more plans other than the crazy Marathon Des Sables to do any more big mountains in the Greater Ranges?
I would love to. My husband and I, new husband and I,
yes,
he is actually one of the reasons I got into some of this climbing and mountaineering, but we've been concentrating a little bit more on some of the more technical peaks and things in the Alps.
Okay.
Developing some skills that way. So not necessarily big commercial expeditions, but sort of more 1-2 day jaunts out into the mountains and sort of experiencing that. And also, but I would, in terms of big mountains, apart from Everest, which I think unfortunately will probably remain out of my reach to do.
Yes.
I would love to do Amadablam. That's probably the one beautiful mountain.
Well, that's within view, isn't it, as well?
It is
of Everest.
It is within view, and it is. I was lucky enough to do the base camp trek recently, and Amadablam is definitely one of the most beautiful mountains, in the region, and everything I've heard about it from people who've climbed it before just rave about how kind of gloriously technical but wonderful it is as a mountain. So that's on the bucket list for mountaineering. For sure.
Good stuff. And any sort of big named mountains in the Alps or anything like that?
Well, I've done Mont Blanc now, so we took one, but I would love to do. I'm not sure. I have to look into,
because I heard that's not very technical on Mont Blanc. You can walk up it relatively easily.
You can. I think it's just the thing with. I mean, there's obviously multiple routes you can do.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Normal route up via the kind of the Tête Rousse and the Goûter Hut.
Yeah.
It can be very sort of easy and untechnical, but there's some difficult sections that you have to be aware of timing wise, and I think it's not to be underestimated. And I think that's really where a lot of people have trouble. They might think that it's easier than it is, and then therefore be underprepared and under acclimatized and sort of unaware of some of the rockfall and other dangers that exist. And that's what could make it potentially dangerous, as being, I think, any big mountain that you're about to climb, no matter what its reputation for how easy it is, if you don't take it seriously, you can very quickly find yourself in a lot of trouble. Even Nevis, even Snowdon, which is something that comes up in Breathless as well. Even those a mountain like Snowdon, which, you know, obviously thousands, hundreds of thousands of people do every year, if you don't have respect for what you're doing and for the mountain itself and everything, you can find yourself in some trouble.
Everything can change very quickly. Yeah. Yes. Well, it's been absolutely fantastic speaking to you. I'm really happy that you've given up your time to speak to me about your new book and all your sort of climbing and mountaineering. I think it's been fantastic. Thank you.
Oh no, it's been my pleasure. And
so just remind us again when it comes out and what it's called and where to get it from.
Yeah, well, Breathless is coming out on February 17th. It should be available on all good retailers, and in fact, Waterstones have done a special edition with a mountain on the edge, so on the sprayed edge of the book, it's called. So it's
fantastic,
a limited edition available through Waterstones, but you can get it Amazon or your local independent bookshop as well.
Fantastic. And where can people kind of get hold of you and follow you and so forth?
Yeah, I am all over social media, of course. So on Twitter, Amy McCulloch, or on Instagram, Amy McCulloch Books. Those are the two most likely places to find me. Also, my website, amymcculloch.net. Please feel free to drop me a line. I love to hear from readers or other mountaineers and to talk more about books or mountaineering or any of that.
I hope everything goes well with your Marathon Des Sables and all your training goes to plan and you don't have any injuries and you finish it. That's the main thing, I think.
That is the goal. I'm aiming to be a completer, not a competer.
Absolutely. I think that's probably very sensible. Yes. Yes.
Tomorrow, actually, if you're interested, on YouTube, I'm putting up a little, a very short, sort of 6-minute video that we filmed in Nepal about kind of the story behind the book and things.
Okay. Can do a link in the show notes to that and things like that. So,
oh, thanks, dude. Actually, it's really great to talk to someone. I've talked to a lot of book people recently, but not a lot of people who have such an interest in the mountaineering side.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you.
Well, no, it's been great. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for your time, and I hope you go well with the Marathon Des Sables.
Thank you so much. Okay, bye bye.
All right, thanks very much. Bye.